So here's what the car looks like now. I decided to go with safety cone orange this time around. I really have a thing for the orange color. I loved the way the car looked when I got it in the orange gel coat, and I've really been wanting to get back to an orange on this car. I'll step through the process, go through what I used, how many coats of each I applied, and give my opinion on the Dip Armor product. So far, I have been very impressed. I think the thing that is most amazing about this is just the feel of the Plastidip. It's no longer kind of that rubbery feeling that you get with the standard PDS. It's just amazingly smooth, super slick, and of course you've got that satin finish. I think really the next major evolution of this product is going to be if they're able to get the dip armor in a gloss formulation. That is going to really just crank the doors open in terms of capability of this product. You know, I think that there's a lot of people who kind of look down on it because you can't get that real paint-like finish with the DIY level of Plastidip. You can do so with the Autoflex, but really you got to be a pro installer to be able to use that. But for the DIY crowd, this is just about the best that you can do. You can get gloss if you use Dip Pearl top coat gloss formulation. However, then you don't get the same robustness or strength to solvents, especially gasoline, that you do with the Dip Armor. And of course, you don't get this slick finish either. So really, this is definitely the next level for the product. And I think the next real big evolutionary step for Plastidip is to be able to get this formulation in a gloss, and I think that will really change the game for the DIY crowd. Here you see me sporting my favorite plaster dipping shirt. It's the same shirt I've worn every time I've plaster dipped so far. I used a little more than 2.5 gallons of white PDS for my base coats. For my color coats, I used about 3.5 gallons of the safety cone orange. The SLC does tend to be a fairly large car. I think it fits somewhere between the medium and the large car. It's low, but there's a lot of surface area to paint. And then new for this time is the Dip Armor product. So I'm really excited to see how this stuff works. It should bring a whole new level to the plaster dipping game. So looking forward to trying that out. And then, of course, when you're dipping, always wear a respirator. Definitely some VOCs coming off of the plaster dip, so you want to make sure you stay safe. All right, Big D is here. Let's jump into it. So here I am wiping the body panels down with some pre-clean. This is stuff that you get at a typical body shop or automotive paints supplier. And here I am hitting everything up with a tack cloth just to make sure that all the little dust particles get off the car before we hit it up with paint. And here's my brand new camera tipping over and falling onto the ground. That is the look of sadness. First coat of white PDS going down. With the first coat, you want to go real light, just do a tack coat. You don't want full coverage here. You're just trying to give the plaster dip something to grab onto. So real light with the first one or even two coats. Second coat going down here. Now you can see I'm getting a little bit heavier with the product. You can see that I'm getting better coverage. And then here we go. This is the last coat. So I did one light tack coat, and I did 4 coats with the white PDS as my base coats for this dip job today. And then here I am just kind of going around hitting all the various body panels and trying to get into the various nooks and crannies to get better coverage. And here's what it looks like when the white PDS base coat is dried. Alright, now mixing up the safety cone orange. First color coat going down here. There's no need to do a light tack coat for the color, just do your standard wet coat. So that alternating dark and light striping that you see along the back there, that's tiger striping. And really that is lack of skill. So practice makes perfect. And last color coat going down, I ended up doing 6 color coats with the safety cone orange. Alright, so I've just finished spraying my last color coat. It's had a few minutes to dry now. Do a quick walk around. Don't know if I would call this my best work, but it's not terrible. Still definitely a beginner when it comes to painting. Coverage is pretty good. Certainly much better than the sulfur yellow. Went through 3.5 gallons and I got about 6 coats of the color. First coat or two might have been a little bit light, but the last were better. You can kind of see differences in finish here. That's the tiger striping due to lack of skill. Hopefully once the dip armor goes down, it'll blend some of that out, but you know, it's texture, so whatever texture you've got, the dip armor is gonna just show. So we'll see what that looks like once we're done. But overall, better than my last couple. You can see if you look down here, I was able to get a decent amount of coverage with the color coat, just kind of spraying and trying to use the overspray to kind of shoot into that gap there. Decent. Better than having the body panels too close and then not having any coverage at all. So there's that. Next up is the dip armor. Now, dip armor does have isocyanates in it, so you do have to be very careful with this stuff. Dipyourcard.com does recommend you wear a full face respirator when you're using this product, and they also recommend that you use a full Tyvek suit as well. This stuff aerosolizes and gets everywhere, and it'll cover you pretty well if you're not wearing a full Tyvek suit. Now, the recommendation is that you do 2 layers of dip armor, and there's no need to wait in between layers. You just go ahead and spray, finish the car, and then go right back into it again. There's no need to wait for it to flash before you come back with your second layer. Some of the chemicals that make up Plastidip gloss finish to it, but over time, approximately 24 hours, that high gloss finish will fade and it'll turn to a satin finish. Okay, Here's what it looks like once the dip armor goes down. You can see that it's got quite a bit of gloss and shine right now, but that is going to go away. It takes about 24 hours for the dip armor to really get cured, or at least start the curing process. And during that time, it will start to go satin. But so far, so good. I think I was able to get rid of some of that tiger striping. And we'll see what happens once the dip armor cures. So when I sprayed this, I did wear a full face mask / respirator, and I'm wearing a full Tyvek suit, and that's because this stuff sprays and just gets everywhere. Sprays a lot closer to standard clear coat, and yeah, that stuff just gets everywhere. So, safety cone orange with dip armor. Looks good. Now here's the real bummer of the entire day. I mixed 4 quarts of dip armor up, and this is what I've got left. So I used about 2.5 quarts. I may have gone a little thin, but I'd rather go just a little thin than too thick. When I sprayed a test sample a week or 2 ago, I accidentally shot too much dip armor on, and it really just killed I'll say the sheen. The color became muted, much more muted than I was expecting for it to be. So we'll see how this test sample looks, and we'll see how the car does with a slightly thinner layer. I think I may have shot the equivalent of about 3 or 4 coats of dip armor when I did my test sample last time. And the issue is that I didn't dial back on the product in my gun, and I just kind of pulled the trigger, and man, this stuff flows quick. So you gotta make sure that you do a test area before you switch over to dip armor and start spraying that, because it will shoot out much faster than regular PDS. Big jug of IPA to clean everything up once we're done. So now we wait. All right, it's been about 20 hours now since I last shot the dip armor, and you can see the sheen is starting to kind of settle down a little bit, but still got some gloss to it. But boy, the feel of this Plastidip is really insane. Nothing like Plastidip at all. It doesn't have that rubbery texture or kind of that stickiness to it. Almost reminds me of having just applied a fresh coat of dip coat and kind of getting that slick feeling. It's kind of what this feels like. Really pretty good. As far as the tiger striping that I had in this panel here, it's largely gone. I think the dip armor, I was able to lay enough of a coating with the dip armor that it was able to flatten some of it and kind of blend it together. I do have to say, definitely still a beginner, but the texture, you can see there's a decent amount in the reflection here from the light up above, but this is actually pretty good as far as what I'm used to spraying. There's a little bit more texture, you can see it here. A little bit more here. That's typically what I've been doing on my dip jobs. So really, in the hands of somebody who actually knows what they're doing, you can get a really nice product. This particular panel right here, I don't know if I can get it to show up, but this is super smooth. It looks great. So there's certainly a lot of potential in the product if you know what you're doing. But for DIY, this is the 3rd time I've picked up a spray gun. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the results. So next step is unmasking everything and then reassembling the body panels. That's gonna be a whole lot of fun. Here's all the hardware that's got to go back in the car to reassemble it. All right, I've gone around and scored the edge of my tape line. Let's see how this does. Here's a tight corner where it looks like the dip is starting to pull back from the bodywork. I don't know if maybe I didn't prep this area well enough, but I'll have to push that down. Maybe some naphtha pushed into the corner here to try to get that to seal back down. That might do the trick. Okay, so it looks like I was able to repair this. So what I did was I pulled the dip back slightly, and then I grabbed a syringe and loaded it up with some naphtha, and then I kind of dribbled the naphtha behind the pulled up dip and just let it sit and dwell for a couple of seconds, and then I pushed the dip back down and I kind of just rubbed it back and forth to kind of get it to remelt and attach to the bodywork, and then I kind of came back up and cleaned it. So it appears as though the dip is now hanging onto the bodywork. So we'll see how long that lasts, but it appears that that is now repaired. The wheel wells can be kind of tough to get really good penetration in here with the Plastidip. And in the past, what I would do is I would come back here and I would dip my finger in naphtha and run that along the interior edge here so that I could make sure that the dip would adhere really well, because this lip is fairly thin, and I was concerned that the dip would pull up, especially from rocks and things getting kicked up into this area. But this time around, the dip is holding on to that inner edge really well. And in fact, I haven't run any naphtha up along the interior edge here, so we'll see how that does. But I've been really impressed with just how well the orange PDS sprayed and the dip armor as well. I don't know if maybe the dip armor, because it was a little smoother flowing and a little bit thinner, if that was able to kind of remelt this edge well enough that I no longer have to come back with the naphtha. Go back to some of the photos of what my car looks like when the Plastidip is off and it's just primer and black paint. You'll understand why I separated the rear clam from the spider as I did. On my car, I had painted this portion, this portion of the spider here, black. And what happens is, if I had masked it so that the black remained, then I would get color on this panel here. You'd see a small strip of black, and then you'd see the color panel here. When you're standing back and looking at it from the side, not much of a big deal here. But if I rotate around and I look like this, from this perspective, you can see that there's enough of a gap here, and there's enough of a step between the rear clam and the spider that if this portion were black, that black line would stand out quite a bit. And I just didn't want that, so I figured having color here would allow this seam to blend a little bit more, and it wouldn't be quite as noticeable. So by setting the body up as I did, I was able to get the Plastidip to get into the inner portion of the panel here. If I had just sprayed the car as it was with the panels just the way they are, there would be certain areas where I wouldn't be able to get access to certain portions of the body panels because they would be occluded by the other panel next to it. And here's why it's important. As I opened the door, you can see I was able to get some dip into this area here. And I think it's important to do that because as the door is open, as you see now, you can see the orange along the door. And the only way I was able to do that is by separating the body panels in such a way that I could get just a little more gap to this edge, and I was able to use the overspray essentially to get down into this area to penetrate and to get some coverage here. You can see it's pretty light as I get to the upper portion of the door here. One of the byproducts of that, however, is that the dip is not nearly as smooth here as it is on the standard part of the panel. And that's because PDS, when you overspray the PDS, as I did here, it tends to atomize and basically dry before it hits the surface, and then that creates little ball formations basically, and so that's why it's really rough here. There's a ton of texture here, but I figured having texture but getting some color here was better than having no color at all. So here you can see another reason why I wanted to separate the panels as I did while I was spraying. You can see that I've got color coverage all along the interior of this particular panel here, coming around and then going up into this portion of the spider and the front clam as well. You can see some of the masking still there. I got to pull that off. And you can see here with the way that I positioned the door while I was spraying that I was able to penetrate into this portion of the spider fairly well and get good coverage with the color as well. You can see there's certain portions of my spider where I've applied clear PPF just because this area tends to get dinged up pretty decently. As you're coming in and out of the car, you can see there's some pretty decent scrapes here from my shoe as I was getting in or out of the car. As you can see, the body fitment is not perfect. I didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to get the body perfect before I dipped the car for the first time, and really there were a couple of factors there. One was I just wanted to get the car done and I wanted to drive, but the other was that I knew that at some point in the future I was probably going to do a quote-unquote real paint job on the car, and it just didn't seem to make sense to me to invest a whole lot of time in getting everything perfect, have the body age, and then after the body had aged, I'd have to go back and retune everything prior to doing the real paint job. So I kind of just did a decent fit. You can see there's some misalignment there, but overall, you know, it's decent. Now because of that, as I walk down the car, you can see that there's some slight misalignment here between the front fender, the spider here, and the door. You can see how this portion of the front clam lifts up a little bit, and you can see this edge. And then similarly, if I turn around here and I look at the door to the rear clam, you can see how this portion of the rear clam pokes up a little bit proud of the door. So there are little misalignments here and there throughout the car, and that's why I decided to position the body as I did during the dipping process. So this is an interesting experiment that I'm going to be trying out this time around. This area of the spider here gets whacked pretty good by all the rocks that get kicked up from the tire, and they bang this area pretty well. So what I've done in the past is after dipping, I would let the dip cure for a couple of days, and then after that I would come back in here and I would apply a clear PPF to this so that the PPF could take the brunt of the damage. However, with the dip armor, I'm going to give the dip armor a shot. I'm going to see just how robust and strong this dip armor is. If it's able to withstand all the rock strikes and still look pretty decent, I think that's going to be pretty awesome to not have to come back in here and add the clear PPF. The issue with adding the clear PPF is that the clear PPF will absorb the dyes from the PDS that you shoot underneath it, and visually you can see a pretty stark difference between the body panel and then the PPF, because the PPF draws so much of the dye from the PDS up into it. It becomes a darker, richer color than the body panel, and so it's very obvious that you're running a clear strip of PPF in there. Now we do the same thing in this lower portion here as well. Piece of PPF here, piece of PPF here, and even along the interior portion, or the forward-facing portion of this part of the spider here, I'd put a strip of PPF there too. So I'm not going to do that this time around. Okay, so quick walk around. It's been almost a week now since I last completed the dip job. Can't really see just what the finish is like right now because the sun isn't up, but it's pretty impressive for just PDS with the dip armor on top. You can kind of see some glint coming off of the reflection there. And the way it feels is really just incredible. Nothing like that rubbery feeling you get with standard PDS.